Okay, guys, we're going to do a quick lesson on literary essay because I know we need a quick review. It's been, a week or so before we looked at our essays besides typing them. So I just wanted to review with you. We went over what a literary essay is an essay kind of about what you read. And it helps you understand more and dive deeper about books and about life. And so we had some common types of literary essays, and you guys had typed those up yesterday, and you started them with your body. So we have some common types. So you can talk about theme or the big idea, the lessons that the characters learn. That's a huge part of literary essay, or you could have a character analysis essay. And what that means is you can talk about character traits, you could talk about how specifically the characters change over time. And lastly, there is, or about how characters, their relationships are with one another. Because sometimes character relationships can be complicated and tell us a lot about the story. And then lastly, we have compare contrast. So compare and contrast are um, either comparing and contrasting two characters or two different stories. So we had a bunch of people do different things, and some of you didn't quite do any of these, so you guys are going to have to go back and look at yours. But when we look at how a literary essay is written, there's an introduction, which we haven't done yet, and then a body, and then a conclusion. So today we're on the body, which includes 3 to 4 relevant pieces of evidence. So right now, you guys kind of started this, but you don't all have the relevant evidence yet. So you have ideas, but you need to go back into the text and take specific evidence from the text. So the first thing that we do with the essay is have a claim or a thesis statement so that we can prove with evidence. So you guys had already kind of decided what your claims are. So a claim is a big idea or main argument that you have about a book. So your claim is your thesis statement of your essay. So a thesis statement is the one sentence that clearly states the main point. So that a character has changed, that the theme of the story is about learning, etc., etc. So the important part that we're doing today, and I'm just going to play this last slide, is we had done our claims and we had sort of looked and started an essay, but we didn't really go in and edit it or revise it. So a lot of you, what you did is you paraphrased. So you expressed the author's words and meanings using your own words. But there's a couple other ways that we need to also strategies that we use in our essays. So we can write a brief statement to wrap up an author's ideas and meaning. And I think some of you might have done paraphrasing, some of you might have been summarizing. And the last way is a quotation. So exact words from the author and the text using quotation marks to give the author credit. Okay, according to the author. All right, so a lot of you guys are paraphrasing and summarizing, but you don't have the quotations yet. So it's that specific scene in that story that supports whatever you're saying, whether your character's grouchy, that specific scene that shows they're grouchy, literally, the character yelled, get out of here, to his brother, which makes me see he's grouchy, and you would do that in quotation marks. Or if it was character change, suddenly the character felt different. And you might use that quotation if that was in the story. So you have to use exact text from the story. So we had read this story called Those Shoes. And I'm going to quickly read it again, but I'm going to go in and pull out the actual text that I'm going to use for my essay so you guys can see how this is. I have dreams about those shoes. Black high tops, 2 white stripes. Graham, I want them. There's no room for want around here. Just need, Grandma says. And what do you need? You need is new boots for the winter. Brandon T comes to school in those shoes. He says he's the fastest runner now, not me. I was always the fastest runner before those shoes came along. Nate comes to school in those shoes. Antonio and I count on how many times Nate goes to the bathroom. 7 times in one day, just so he can walk up and down the hall real slow. Next, Alan, Jacoby, and Terrence each get a pair. Then one day in the middle of kickball, one of my shoes comes apart. Look like you could use a new pair, Jeremy, Mr. Alfred, the guidance counselor, says. He brings out a box of shoes and other stuff he has for kids who need things. He helps me find the only shoe that are my size, Velcro, like the ones my little cousin from Marshall wears. They have an animal on them from a cartoon I don't even think any kid ever watched. When I come back to the classroom, Alan Jacoby takes one look at my Mr. Alfrey shoes and laughs, and so do Terrence, Brandon T, and everyone else. The only kid not laughing is Antonio Parker. At home, Grandma says, "How kind of Mr. Alfrey." I nod and turn my back. I'm not going to cry about my any dumb shoes. But when I write my spelling words later, every word looks like the word shoes, and my grip is so tight on my pencil, I think it might bust. On Saturday, Grandma says, "Let's check out those shoes you were wanting so much. I got a little bit of money aside. Might be enough, you never know." At the shoe store, Grandma turns those shoes over so she can check the price. When she sees it, she sits down heavy. "Maybe they wrote it down wrong," I say. Grandma shakes her head. Then I remember the thrift shops. What if the rich kid who outgrew his pair got 2 pairs for Christmas and gave one of them away? We ride the bus to the thrift shop. Black cowboy boots, pink slippers, sandals, high heels, every kind of shoes except the ones I want. We ride the bus to the second thrift shop. Not a pair of shoes in sight. Around the corner to the third, I see something in the window. Black shoes with 2 stripes, high tops, perfect shape, $2.50. Those shoes. My heart is pounding hard as I take off my shoes and hitch up my baggy socks. "How exciting," Grandma says. "What size are they?" I shove my first foot into the shoe, curling my toes to get my heel in. I don't know, but I think they fit. Grandma kneels on the floor and feels for my toes at the end of the shoe. "Oh, Jeremy," she says, "I can't spend good money on shoes that don't fit." I pull the other shoe on and walk around. "They're okay," I say, holding my breath and praying that my toes will fall right then and there, but my toes don't fall off. I buy them anyway with my own money, and I squeeze them on and limp to the bus. At home, a few days later, Grandma puts a new pair of snow boots in my closet and doesn't say a word about my 2 big feet shuffling around in my 2 small shoes. "Sometimes 2 shoes stretch," I say, Grandma. Grandma gives me a hug. I check every day, but those shoes don't stretch. I have to wear Mr. Alfrey's to school instead. One day during math, I glanced at Antonio's shoes. One of them is taped up and his feet look smaller than mine. After school, I head to the park to thank Antonio's there. The only kid who didn't laugh at me in Mr. Alfie's shoes. We shoot baskets. A loose piece of tape on Antonio's shoe smacks the concrete every time he jumps. "I think I'm going to do it." We leap off the swings. "I'm not going to do it." We race from one end of the playground to the other. "I'm not going to do it," I say. "Do what?" Antonio says, breathing hard. Grandma calls me for my supper and invites Antonio over too. After supper, he spies on my shoes. "How come you don't wear them, Antonio?" I shrug. My hands are sweaty. I could feel him wishing those shoes were his. That night, I'm awake for a long time thinking about Antonio. When morning comes, I try one shoe on at a time. Before I can change my mind, the shoes are in my coat. Snow is beginning to fall as I run across the street to Antonio's apartment. I put the shoes in my front door, push the doorbell, and run. At school, Antonio was smiling big in his brand new shoes. I feel happy when I look at his face and mad when I look at Mr. Alfie's shoes. But later, when it comes time for recess, something happens. Everywhere there's snow. "Leave your shoes in the hall and change into your boots," the teacher announces. Leave your shoes in the hall? Then I remember what I have in my backpack. New boots. New black boots that no kid has ever worn before. Standing in line to go to recess, Antonio leads forward and says thanks, and I smile and give him a nudge. "Let's race." So I'm going to do my essay on on those shoes, and so I need to start thinking about what I'm going to write. So I might talk about the 2 characters having a special bond, and so my text evidence number 1 is, for example, when Jeremy came back into class with his Velcro character shoes on, everyone laughed except Antonio Parker. Antonio didn't laugh because he knows what it feels like to not have cool shoes too. I know in this story that these kids don't have much money. I know because they're going to thrift shops and they're looking for prices and all that kind of thing. So, and second piece of evidence, according to the text after school, Jeremy and Antonio shoots hoops, play in their playground, and eat dinner at Jeremy's house together. And another example is Jeremy takes his new shoes across the street to give them to Antonio. Jeremy generously gave his new shoes to Antonio because he also needed them. So these pieces are a way to say that these 2 characters have a special bond. I could do a theme, and I could kind of say something about generosity, or I could say something about having everything you need with family and with friends, or I think I might choose the theme generosity if I'm going to do one on theme. And so if I'm going to use the theme generosity, I need to find something in this text that shows generosity. And so I might talk about, or maybe wanting to belong. Maybe my theme is about wanting to belong and feeling like you want to belong. So then I would have to go into my texts and look for specific evidence. So two of my things I can paraphrase or I can summarize, like we talked about in this. But at least one piece of my evidence in my essay and in your essay has to be a quotation. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to kind of look and see where I want, if I'm going to be doing wanting to fit in. So I'm going to kind of find, then one day in the middle of Kikol, his shoes came apart. I'm just kind of scanning through. So when I come back to the classroom, Alan Jacoby takes one look at Mr. Alfie's shoes and laughs, and so do Terrence, Brandon T, and everyone else. The only kid not laughing at me is Antonio Parker. So I'm inferring that this kid feels really bad here. So I'm going to take this evidence right here, and I'm going to use this in my essay right here when I come back to the classroom. So right here. And then maybe, oops, sorry, my highlighter's not highlighting so well. I'm going to go on a little bit more, and I'm going to say, where else does he feel like, you know, here Antonio's talking about how he wants the shoes and how he used to be the fastest, and now he's not. So there's like this wanting, okay, and how he believes that Brandon T comes to school and that he's the fastest runner now, not me. And it's all about these shoes. So Grandma's saying, you know, this has nothing to do with his running, but in his mind, he feels that these shoes and fitting in is going to make him the fastest runner. So I could use that spot and use that as a quote. And I could also use this part, how he wants so bad for them to fit just because he feels like he's going to fit in, and Grandma's saying no. Those are several parts that I could use in my essay. So I might, in my wanting to belong essay, so I'm going to move this. And so if my thesis statement was something about wanting to belong, then I could then say, according to the story, Brandon T comes to school in those shoes, and he's the fastest runner in school, not the main character. But the main character believes it's because the shoes, really just because he wants to fit in. So that I might write that. So I'm not going to write this essay. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of how to do it. You have the stories in your Google Classroom, and now I want you to go through your stories, your stories, and kind of make a decision on which ones you would like.